Hey guys, I am hopping on here to do Daniel chapter 5. We're getting close to Daniel chapter 7 is really when he starts start seeing more stuff about the end times. And so that's what I wanted to hit on because the Lord was like, do Revelation and then Daniel and then Ezekiel. So, Lord willing, we're still here. When I'm done with Daniel, I will go to Ezekiel, which will be a lot of learning for me because that has always been one of the hardest books of the Bible for me to read. In fact, Revelation was easier. I don't know. I just had more of an interest in it, I guess. Okay, so I want to go ahead and get started in prayer. So, Father in heaven, in Jesus' name, Lord, I just thank you for this time. I pray that you would bless the words that I say, that I wouldn't say anything that you don't want me to say, and that you would bless every single viewer, whether it be now or later, in Jesus' name. Amen. So, what funner thing could you think of to do on a Saturday night than a Bible study? None. Oh, and by the way, the cough has gotten a lot better. Faith and I are both doing a lot better. I ended up getting pink eye. I don't know what happened. So I had to start. Thankfully, I have drops and stuff that I can use, and you can't even tell. But yeah, it's my right eye. It was all red yesterday, and I'm like, oh. So I was using drops, not the medicated kind that I started today. But I woke up and my eye was all gunky, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So whatever. Sorry, I'm itchy. We had a weird day today. We're sitting in the living room and Brandon's like, why does the TV keep shutting off? And I'm like, what are you talking about? He was like, I want a new TV anyway. So I'm like, I don't know. It was working fine. So then he comes in and he's like, there's something weird going on with the electricity upstairs. And I was like, what? And so it was acting weird. So I look at our water pressure. We have a well, and of course it's powered by electricity. And I get in the shower because I'm like, well, if the world's ending, I'm at least going to be clean for a couple days. And then if Jesus comes back, I'm going to at least be clean, right? So the things I think about, I'm telling you guys, it's funny. But anyway, so we call our local electrical company. They come out and they had to run a line because apparently sometimes the line that they dig underground just goes bad over time. And I'm like, really? I've never heard of that. But anyways, so we had half electrical in our house and half none. It was really strange. And I am not going to start coughing. I have been so good today. I've only had a couple little coughing fits, but I am not going to start coughing. Okay, so chapter 5. Belshazzar the king made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords and drank wine before the 1,000. While he tasted the wine, Belshazzar commanded that they bring in the golden and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple which was in Jerusalem, so that the king and his officials, his wives, and his concubines might drink from them. Then they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of God, which was at Jerusalem. And the king and his officials, his wives, and his concubines drank from them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and of silver, of bronze, of iron, of wood, and of stone. Immediately fingers of a man's hand appeared and wrote opposite the lampstand on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the back of the hand that wrote. Then the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosed, and his knees struck against one another. The king cried aloud to bring in the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers, and the king spoke and said to the wise men of Babylon, Whoever shall read this writing and show me its interpretation shall be clothed with scarlet and have a chain of gold about his neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Then all the king's wise men came in, but they could not read the writing, nor make known to the king its interpretation. Then King Belshazzar was greatly troubled, and his countenance was changed in him, and his nobles were astonished. Now the queen came into the banquet house because of the words of the king and his nobles, and the queen spoke and said, O king, live forever. Do not let your thoughts trouble you, or let your countenance be changed. There is a man in your kingdom in whom is the spirit of the holy God, and in the days of your father, excuse me, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, were found in him. And King Nebuchadnezzar, your father the king, made him master of the magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and soothsayers. Inasmuch as an excellent spirit and knowledge and understanding, interpreting dreams and explanation of enigmas and solving of problems were found in the same Daniel, who the king named Belteshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will give the interpretation. Then Daniel was brought in before the king, and the king spoke and said to Daniel, Are you that Daniel who is one of the sons of the captivity of Judah, whom the king my father brought out of Judah? Now I have heard of you that the Spirit of God is in you, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom have been found in you. Now the wise men, the astrologers, have been brought in before me, that they should read this writing and make known to me its interpretation, but they could not give the interpretation of the matter. And I have heard of you that you can give interpretations and solve problems. Now, if you can read the writing and make known to me its interpretation, you shall be clothed with scarlet and have a chain of gold about your neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Then Daniel answered and said before the king, Let your gifts be for yourself, or give your rewards to another. Yet I will read the writing to the king and make known to him the interpretation. O king, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar your father a kingdom and majesty and glory and honor. And for the majesty that he gave him, all peoples, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. Whom he would, he slaughtered, and whom he kept alive. Whom he would, he set up, and whom he would, he put down. But when his heart was lifted up and his mind hardened in pride, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. And he was driven from the sons of men, and his heart was made like the animals, and his dwelling was with the wild donkeys. He was given grass to eat like oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, until he knew that the Most High God rules in the kingdom of men, and that he appoints over it whomever he wills. Yet you, his son, O Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, though you knew all this, but have lifted up yourself against the Lord of heaven. And they have brought the vessels of his house before you, and you and your lords, your wives, and your concubines have drunk wine in them. And you have praised the gods of silver and gold, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which see not, nor hear, nor know. And the God in whose hand is your breath, and whose are all your ways, you have not glorified. Then the hand was sent from him, and this inscription was written. This is the inscription that was written. Many, many, Tekel Epharsin. I'm not sure if that's the correct pronunciation. Forgive me if it's not. Your faith, poor thing. Okay, verse 26. This is the interpretation of the message. Many. God has numbered your kingdom and put an end to it. Tekel. You have been weighed in the balances and are found wanting. Paris. Your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and Parisians. Then Belshazzar gave the command, and they clothed Daniel with scarlet and put a chain of gold about his neck, and made a proclamation concerning him that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. That same night, Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, was slain. Then Darius the Mede, received the kingdom, being about 62 years old. She's okay. I'm going to not, this is pretty cut and dry up until this point. There's not a whole lot of things to teach on this. So when I first started reading it, I was like, I thought I read it as Belteshazzar's feast. And I was like, they made Daniel king? And I was like, Belshazzar. I was like, oh, okay. This is not Daniel. But Daniel's Babylonian name is so similar to the king's son's name that I thought, man, the king must really like Daniel. I mean, to name someone after your child or to name your child after someone, that's a lot of respect. And I don't know how old his son is in comparison to how long Daniel's been there and all that kind of stuff. But their names are very similar. So that was just something that caught my mind, caught my thoughts. I was like, maybe. So his son has King Nebuchadnezzar's son has a feast. He is the king now. He has a feast and the biggest strike, okay? He takes the stuff, the vessels, golden and silver vessels from that his dad had taken from the temple, and they start drinking out of them and having a party. Like, that's blasphemous. It's so wrong. And then they start, so not only do they do that, then they start worshiping these random gods. What? Gods of gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. Really? Seriously? Like, and it was swift. Okay? The punishment was swift. Side note, story. Poor little thing. I'm gonna have to go up there in a couple minutes. Side note. So one time I was driving along in the left lane and I was going like 75, but I was passing someone, like, and they were on the right. This car comes zooming up behind me, flashing its lights, and then like flies around me and goes flying past and like driving up over this hill. And I was like, oh my gosh, this guy almost rear-ended me going like 90 miles. He was going 90 miles an hour easily. Sorry. I'm going to get some water. Poor little Faith. Okay. So as I'm coming up over the corner, I see a state trooper sitting in the median. I was like, oh. And then they see the guy or gal, I think it was a guy, flying by at like 100 miles an hour. And he goes after him. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have never seen that. Like, talk about swift punishment. This is swift punishment for Belshazzar, okay? God was not playing around. Okay, so then in verse 5, fingers of a man's hand start writing on the wall. And Belshazzar is probably like, man, I've had a lot to drink, but there's got to be somebody sober here. Is there writing on the wall? Like, y'all saw that, right? So he is, verse 6 made me laugh because I was like, did he poop his pants? Like, did he crap himself? Is that what happened? So the king's countenance was changed. So he got, was freaking out. Thoughts troubled him so that the joints of his loins were loosed and his knees struck against one another. So he fell over. But did that mean that he joints of his loins? I should have Googled that before. Joints of his loins. Sorry. Joints of his loins were loose. What does that mean? Yeah, he crapped himself. He either peed his pants or he crapped himself. Yep. Yeah. Wow. So, oh, that's why his knees knocked. Okay, his knees struck against one another because he crapped himself and he was trying to hold it in. I guess that's a good way of saying that they crapped themselves. The joints of his loins were loose. That would scare anybody. Honestly. Wow. That's crazy. Okay. It just made me laugh. I'm not happy that what happened to this poor guy. I'm not happy about that. It made me laugh with the translation because it's funny. Okay. So then the king calls for all the new age people to come in. And of course, what happens? They can't tell him the interpretation. They can't. And so instead of like ordering all these people to be killed, the king is just like greatly troubled. Okay. So then the queen comes in, which he has a lot of girlfriends. He's got a lot of people that he's had, his wives, his concubines, but the queen, who is the one above all of them, she comes in and says, "O king, live forever. Do not let your thoughts trouble you. Don't let your countenance be changed. So don't be sad. There's a man in your kingdom knew the spirit of the holy God." So then he tells them about Daniel. And so they call Daniel. Daniel's probably asleep, passed out, dreaming good, probably having an awesome dream from the Lord. Meanwhile, these people are partying. They're like, "Oh gosh, go get Daniel. Something happened." So then Daniel goes in before the king. And, the king is like, "Hey, are you the Daniel that everyone's told me about?" He's like, "Yeah, that's me. That's me." So then he tells him, if you do this, then you'll get rewarded. Daniel's like, "Keep your stuff, man. I don't really want it, but I'll interpret the writing on the wall." So then Daniel starts chastising Belshazzar in a polite way. "O king, the most high God gave Nebuchadnezzar your father a kingdom and majesty and glory and honor. And all these things he gave him." And then in verse 20, "But when his heart was lifted up and his mind hardened in pride, he was removed from his throne." And then in verse 22, Daniel's like, "You, his son, knew this. You knew this. And you have not humbled your heart towards the Lord. And in fact, not only have you not humbled your heart, you took the things that your dad took from the temple, God's holy temple, and you defiled them. And then you worshiped other gods." So then he said what the inscription was. And so Mene it means to number, and Tekel means to weigh, and Upharsin means to divide. So then he gives him the interpretation. And then after Daniel gives him the interpretation, King Belshazzar he is a man of his word. He gives Daniel a robe of scarlet and puts a chain of gold around him, even though Daniel didn't want it. And then he made him the third ruler in the kingdom. Well, then, verse 30, that same night, Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, was slain. So then Darius the Mede received the kingdom, being about 62. So this next king was about 62 years old when he took over. Crazy. "O king, live forever," for the next 2 hours or however long it took for him to get slain. I don't know. I don't even know what time it was when all this happened, but I'm guessing it was at night. Like a my gosh, a feast of some sorts. Yeah. So, believe it or not, the cough is a lot better. It must only be when I'm talking. Um, oh, I got a like. Hi, whoever liked it. So yeah, this it almost when I was reading this, I thought about generational curses, right? So the Lord, he gave Nebuchadnezzar a year before what the dream that he had came to pass. Belshazzar, his son, I don't know how long he was ruling, but the punishment was swift. Like, dude was killed that night. Okay. So it was not a year, it was like that very quickly. I don't know if the punishment was greater, quicker, because because Belshazzar, excuse me, defiled the Lord's things from his temple, or what. But the point is, God was not having it. So I thought about generational curses and how, um, sometimes you just have to know better. Like, people are held to different standards when they know things, when they know better. Like, teachers and preachers are held to a higher standard. So, I don't know. I was just thinking about that. I thought it was interesting. Um, well, that's like I said, this chapter was pretty straightforward, um not too much that needs interpreted. Um the next chapter we'll be talking about Daniel and the lion's den. I think that's one of the most popular stories from the Bible. Um I don't want to even say story, one of the most popular teachings from the Bible. So I just want to say I hope you all are blessed and that you have a great night. And thanks for tuning in. So um, I will be on soon doing chapter 6. I don't know if it'll be tomorrow or in a couple days, but I want to keep it going so that I can get into the end time chapters. So, all right, y'all, have a good night. Be blessed.